Dear friends, I am Gaurav Singh from Sagar University, Madhya Pradesh. Today we will try to learn about the lamellibranchs, also called as bivalves or Pelecypods, which are essentially mollusks. Before we talk about them in detail, it is useful to have a brief revision of the mollusks. The mollusks are characterized by the following traits. Majority of the mollusks are marine and also commonly found in the fresh water. The body is unsegmented and without any appendage. They are bilaterally symmetrical with repetition of the same organ on each side. The symmetry, however, is lost in gastropods to some extent. From the dorsal surface, a fold of the skin arises called as mantle, which secretes one or two piece calcareous shell. A foot is given off from the ventral side for locomotion. Respiration is by means of the gills. A heart is always present on the dorsal surface with an auricle and two ventricles. Nervous system consists of ganglion from which the nerves are ramified. Reproduction is always sexual and most forms are unisexual with a few hermaphrodites. The lamellibranchs have calcareous shell with two piece valve joined together by the ligament on each side and functional only as long as the animal lives and is destroyed after its death, thereby releasing both the shells. Opposite to the dorsal, there is a ventral side from which a muscular foot is given off for the locomotion. Usually the animal crawls on and burrows in on the surface, whereas some of them like Trigonia for example often jumps. The movement is reduced in some forms like Metellus and is lost in the others like Ostrea. Metellus attaches itself to some solid object by muscular bundles given off from the dorsal part called as byssus. The term lamellibranchs derives its name from the leaf-like gills constituted of individual filaments. Then coming to the shell morphology, as we have discussed previously that the shell is dorsal margin, shell is two piece attached to the dorsal margin by ligaments along with the line called as hinge line. The ventral part is just opposite to the dorsal side, anterior being towards the mouth and posterior opposite to it. All the bivalves possesses a pair of shells which may be shut to provide protection from both the environments, that is stresses, for example desiccation in the intertidal habitat and the threat of the predation. Most shells are reasonably robust, which has provided the class with a generally excellent fossil record, although the shell morphology in bivalves is very variable and intimately linked to their life habits. All shells are simple modifications of the mantle used by all shielded mollusks. The shell is secreted by the mantle lobes and grows by marginal accretion as evidenced by the growth lines on the surface of the valves. The growth lines are particularly marked in the bivalves from the intertidal and the shallow temperate habitats where the animals experience pronounced and seasonally and largely stop growing during the winter months. Bivalves which experience more equable conditions do not show such obvious or regular patterns. Inspection of the growth lines in sectioned bivalves show that although most shell's material is added ventrally, the shell is also thickened during the growth, that is demonstrating that the entire mantle surface is responsible for adding the material. The outermost part of the shell is an organic part secreted at the mantle edge. The thickness of the periostracum varies between the taxa from less than 1 millimeter in oysters and scallops to several hundred micrometers in some mussels. In many cases, the periostracum is lost by abrasion and decay during the life of the animal, particularly on the older part of the shell, and there is no real prospects of it being preserved in any but most exceptional circumstances. The primary function of the periostracum is to act as the template on which the calcareous part of the shell is deposited. But from both the corrosive and waters, the predations and that dissolves the shell, it is particularly noticeable that the freshwater bivalves have very thick periostrata, the main part of the shell, however calcareous. It is in effect a ceramic made of the calcium carbonate crystals in an organic matrix, the latter accounting for less than 5% of the proteinaceous matrix controls the polymorph of the calcium carbonate used and the arrangement of the crystals. All bivalves contain aragonite in the shells and the vast majority of are wholly so. Some taxa, however, chiefly those exploiting the epifaunal life habits, also secrete calcite in their outer layers. These oysters have the bulk of the shell is calcitic, with aragonite being confined to the sites of the muscle attachment and the ligament. Molluscan shell is immensely strong, in fact, more stronger than the vertebrate bones. And these are a number of different microstructures, each with different mechanical properties, and most shells are made up of 2 or 3 arranged different layers arrangement, and these are considered to be the phylogenetic significance. It is apparent that the earliest bivalves were wholly aragonetic and chiefly composed of the macrae, and that subsequent evolution has produced the whole array of the microstructural arrangements seen today. The effect of differing crystal sizes, amount of the organic material, and the polymorph used has affected the preservation potential of the Paleozoic and Mesozoic taxa that were originally aragonetic, and entire preservation is in internal molds or are replaced by calcite. The hinge plates is situated dorsally and houses the ligament and teeth. The ligament is an elastic, partially calcified layer that provides a very energy efficient opening mechanism. During the valve closure, the energy is stored in the ligament as it is flexed by the contracted adductor muscles. When the muscle is relaxed, the ligament separating the valves apart, causing them to gape. This passive valve opening mechanism is the reason why many fossil bivalves are found in disarticulated state. Although the ligament result is the seldom preservation and position may be inferred from the presence of the ligament parts in which it is anchored. Most bivalves have teeth on the hinge plate which fit into the corresponding socket on the other. It functions to keep bivalves in perfect alignment. Both ligamenture and dentition vary markedly amongst the higher taxa of the bivalves, and both are often used to as informative character in establishing the phylogenies. A number of attachment scars mark the location where the muscles are anchored to the shell. The most significant of these is the adductor muscle scars, which may be paired or unpaired. They occur posteriorly and anteriorly. If the animal is monomerian and the single muscle scar is present to the posterior, occupies a more central position. In many taxa, there is a thin pallial line running around the shell a small distance from the ventral edges that marks the attachment of the mantle to the shell. In infaunal taxa, where the posterior mantle has been fused, the pallial line is inflected, forming the pallial sinus. The sinus represents the space into which the siphons are withdrawn when the valves are shut. Other muscle attachment scars may be more or less apparent, including the insertions of the pedal musculature, particularly in the burrowing and bisate taxa. Coming to the dentition, the arrangement of teeth on the hinge line, which may be curved or straight, along which the two pieces of the shells are joined, is called as dentition. It plays a very important role from the taxonomic point of view and is of the following different kinds. The first of which is the taxodont. Here the teeth are numerous, similar in size almost on the hinges of both the valves, and are called as taxodont dentition. For example, arca and nucula, etc. Then is disodont. Here the teeth are simple in disodont dentition and are developed from internal margins of the valves and are slightly thickened, for example, metallus. Then is the isodont dentition. There is a median ligament pit on the hinge line and there are almost equal teeth on one valve and corresponding sockets on the other. For example, your spondylus. Then comes the schizodont. In this case, the teeth are few in number and are often grooved. The median tooth, however, is bifid. The examples are trigonia and unio. Then coming to the heterodont, here the teeth are few in number and are unequal in size, with the cardinal tooth right below the umbo and two lateral teeth on, one being anterior and another being posterior lateral in position, for example Venus. Then coming to the desmodont, sometimes the dentition is absent, instead the ridges and laminas are present on the hinge margins, for example Pleuromea. Then coming to the ecology. Modern bivalves exploit a wide range of the life habits. Many burrow to varying depths with soft sediments, but others attach to or bore into the hard substrates. Others have become free living, some with ability to swim. Most bivalves have a marine ecology, exploiting niches from the intertidal zone down to the abyssal depth, but successful groups including the oysters have invaded more brackish conditions and even freshwater, where the modern uninoid mussels caused the enormous damage as biofoulers. The primitive bivalves were marine shallow burrowers, and that the other lifestyles evolved later. It is also apparent that many of the more specialized life habits have evolved separately in a number of different lineages, that is polyphyletically. Seminal works by S. M. Stanley confirmly established how different aspects of the morphology of living bivalves could be related to their life habits, such that it is possible to use these characteristics of extinct taxa to reconstruct the lifestyle. Then is the classification. The lamellibranchs have been classified on many grounds, of which the hinge and dentition are significant traits. As we all know, the phylum is Mollusca and the class is Lamellibranchia. The class is divided into three orders, namely Taxodonta, Anisomaria and Eulabellibranchia. Taxodonta is the hinges taxodont with the two adductor muscles. The age is lower Ordovician to recent, for example Arca and Nicula. Then coming to the Anisomaria, here usually it is inequivalent, anterior adductor muscle is small or absent. Hinge is disodont or isodont, with or without teeth, fixed by the byssus or by the cementation, often with ears and byssal notch. No siphons, and paleoline is present. Paleoline is straight. The pecten, spondylus and the age is Ordovician to recent. Coming to the Eulabellibranchia, the two equal or nearly equal adductor muscles are present, often with siphons. Hinge is schizodont or heterodont or desmodont. For example, it is Maya. Silurian to recent is the age. Then coming to the evolution. Bivalves are generally thought to have evolved from the extinct molluscan class Rostroconchia, although this is not universally accepted. The first fossils widely accepted, but again not universally, as bivalves are from early Cambrian rocks. Fordilla troensis is known from the large number of specimens from the Tomoshian localities in North America, Greenland, and is known from Australia also. But both Fordilla and Pugetia are small, only a few millimeters in length, and are generally thought to have been shallow burrowers. Despite this early appearance, there is then a gap in the bivalve fossil record throughout the middle and upper Cambrian before their reappearance in the early Ordovician, that is Tremadoc. This gap is both perplexing and frustrating. It spans some 4% of the evolutionary history of the class and covers an interval when bivalves are more diverse in terms of both the taxa and the life habits employed. There have been several claims for the middle and upper Cambrian bivalves, but most of these have been dismissed or misidentified. In articulate brachiopoda, it is difficult to explain this gap in the bivalve record, but one plausible explanation is that the earliest bivalves may have lived in nearshore silty facies, which are seldom preserved. By the close of the Ordovician, bivalves were more common and abundant, and all the subclasses recognized had appeared. They are burrowers, and both the endo and the epibysate forms are signs of different feeding strategies like deposit feeders, suspension feeders, etc. Bivalves diversity continued to increase throughout the Paleozoic, although there are small decrees associated with the Ordovician and the Devonian, that is Fresnian Flammanian mass extinction. Throughout the era, Most bivalves remained in primitive life habit with only one genus of each of the borers, that is Corallodomus, and the cementers, that is Pseudomonotis, being recognized, neither of which is widespread. Very few Paleozoic bivalves, for example Lyrodesma, have pallial sinuses, although the effect of the end Permian mass extinction is clearly evident. Losses were small in contrast with those sustained by the other shelly benthos, for example the Brachiopods. The beginning of the Mesozoic saw a further combined increase in the number of taxa with an ever increasing repertoire of the life habits. Many shallow and large number of the bisate taxa adopted more specialized habits such as the cementing, boring and free living. The cementing habit is exemplified by the successful oyster and redistids. The first evidence of the adaptation for the swimming and scallops is recognized in Jurassic taxa, and free reclining the Griffid oysters became abundant and widespread in this period. This major thought has been revised and linked to the Mesozoic marine revolution, the profound reconstructing of the shallow marine communities, and in particular a massive increase in predation pressure at that time. Bivalves are extremely vulnerable to predators and are attacked by a wide range of important predatory groups, for example fish, gastropods, starfishes, crustaceans, mammals and birds, and by a variety of different methods, that is swallowing, hole crushing, drilling and teasing apart. It has been suggested that different groups of bivalves respond in a variety of different ways, for example by living deeper within the sediment, encasing themselves in a hard substrate. Although the end Cretaceous extinction had marked effect on the bivalves, with major groups such as the inoceramids and rudistids being lost, their diversity continued to increase during the Cenozoic. The number of groups exploiting the more specialist boring and cementing habit has continued to grow, and there has been a further taxonomic explosion of the shallow burrowers at lower taxonomic levels. Thank you very much.